episode 37 of the most serious podcast. Now, Geena, what I'll be doing from this episode onward is I'm thinking
Yeah.
of ditching the guest intro bit I used to do. So for the
Okay.
past 36 episodes, I've been recording the guest's intro for 1.5 minute before the conversation starts. And now I'm too lazy to do that. So I'll start with you and I'll just go ahead and, put this conversation right away on all the platforms.
That's okay. That's easier, I guess.
Does it make you feel left out that all the other guests got an intro?
No, I am usually very sucky at intros. So I'm the one person in the meeting being like, oh, I have to introduce myself. Why do I have to do that? Just share you my bio. So it's
And
bad.
see,
But it's okay.
funnily enough, like the part that usually takes most of my time is recording these intros, because then I am the only one who's to judge, whether an intro is correct or I could have done it better or not. So I take, like, if I have to record a 1 minute, 1.5 minute intro, it will take me 15 minutes to 20 minutes of recording to get to that good 1 minute, because I'll do it for 5, 6 times. This could be better. This could be better.
You're your own critique then.
Yeah, maybe I am, and that's the most frustrating part, to record these, because in these conversations, what can, I don't have a second attempt at having you again on the podcast talking about the same old thing. So we will take this very naturally, and the intros are subject to me being able to change them. So that's what makes recording them difficult.
The more mechanical in nature, right?
Yeah. Are you mechanical in nature? What are you like?
Sometimes, but usually the mechanical gets very boring very quickly, and I'm able to identify it, and then I'm like, oh, something needs to be changed, and it's sort of like an ADHD. It's very closely linked to me being ADHD, because the moment it starts getting boring, I am very easily able to identify and sort of look for the new thing. So sometimes it gets very mechanical, especially when you're in a job. It gets really mechanical. But then field of psychology is very fun in itself. It's always different people, different clients, different sort of issues, different techniques how to work with them. So that way, it's always something new and interesting coming up.
So me not introducing you very formally to the people who listen to this podcast, but let me tell them about the incident which introduced me to you. So I'm traveling by metro. I don't even remember from where I was coming. So I was coming back to, I had recently moved to Gurgaon because I had started my job here, and I was coming back from visiting maybe some friend, and I was coming back to Gurgaon from Delhi, and I see, this what should I say, it's a lady girl, I don't know, and I see you sitting there in the metro and reading a very interesting book, and the title was very catchy. I don't remember the title, but so I thought to myself, this is an interesting book she's reading, or maybe it has an interesting title, and should I talk to her? Should I ask her what she's reading? And I was like dicey. I was 50-50. Should I do, or would I look like a creep? Mind your own business. what's what's there to talk about? So I was having that conversation in my head, and I was like, okay, I just asked you what are you reading, and that's how we got talking, and that's how I discovered that what an interesting person Miss Geena is, and she's from the field of psychology, and she's done her master's, and she's looking for a doctorate now, and all the good stuff that you do.
It was Scattered Minds by Gabor Mate. It was about ADHD actually, and that is what I think got us to talking. And I never, like, usually people whenever they see me reading books, even I am that person. If I see somebody sitting next to me and watching something interesting, I just go like, "What are you watching?" Apparently, that's how I got introduced to Doctor Who, because there was a person watching books to me, like, "What are you watching?" So usually it's like a curiosity thing. I never find that creepy. I think that's very childlike, and that should be always there. Be curious about the surroundings. Be curious about what people around you are doing. And that's fun.
Do you think about curiosity in that sense? So I take, I just feel that naturally this comes to me, that I am very curious, and I say this sentence but not completely knowing the meaning of it. So I'll just loosely say that I'm very curious, but do I actually know what curiosity means, or where does this curiosity come from? So I'm not sure that I do. But you, having studied the mind more and having read more books, so can you define curiosity for someone who struggles with the concept of it?
I mean, defining curiosity by textbook, I might not be able to do that because that's not where mine. But it's more of your interaction with the environment. The more I mean, in a definition of child, when a child is very small, so what we say is that, they uses their arms and they use their body parts to connect with the environment. So if जो बच्चे के ऊपर झूला डालते हैं, the child is supposed to touch them and it rotates, and the child does that again because it's curious. Oh, if I touch it, it does this. If I do it in some other way, will it make any difference? If I tap it hard, will it make more hard noise? If I tap it softly, will it make a different noise? So, in a very abstract lens or in a very different lens, that is what curiosity is. You try and see how things are going to work differently, and you interacting with your environment. And it is sort of like a component of intelligence. Creativity is component of intelligence. This is component of intelligence. And some people are a bit more in tune with their environment, so they're a bit more curious about how things are going, why things are going. And you see with people who do physics, they're more curious about things are working. Astronauts are curious in turn. So everybody is curious. That is how they get into stuff. And if they are not, then I mean, it's more of a seeing why they are not. They're not curious about anything at all. But that's really different. You see a new, like people get Alexa, and that is like a घर पे ऐसे शोक होता है वो Alexa ही है, so we need to see what we can say to Alexa. People say different things. People try to get her to do different things. So that's also curiosity to see how a mechanical thing is reacting to us humans. So it is always present there. It's always in a very, very layman term how you're interacting with your environment and how you are perceived, how you're trying to see how different ways you can react with your environment.
And what are you curious about? Do you find yourself naturally trying to answer some questions for yourself? Because I believe that some things you push yourself to do, and some things just pull you to them. And that's where I find, like, for this whole podcast thing as well, this is something, having these conversations is something that I don't have to push myself to do, and it genuinely feels very interesting to me to sit with a person who's done some some work in their life which I find particularly interesting, and have this conversation with them. So do you have certain these things which pull them to you?
I was always curious about human behavior per se. There are different reasons people get into psychology. Being interesting about human behavior is one of them. I was mostly interested in extreme behavior. So if somebody is killing somebody is doing something which is different from norm. Why is that there? What made that difference? So that is something I was initially interested in. I knew that I was not curious about physics or chemistry. I did study physics and chemistry till 12th, but I was not at all curious. I did not care where chemical reactions were going. I just needed marks. But I was during the same time, I was very extremely interested if a particular behavior is coming up. Why is that? If I am feeling stressed, what are my and during that time, what would happen is that whenever I would get extremely stressed, I would have these pains that would shoot through my head, and we weren't able to diagnose it because it was a reaction to a stress. So that also made me curious, like, why is that particular thing happening to me? And when I got to learn more about anxiety, when I got to learn more about stress, it was sort of a self-exploration in that way, that, oh, that is why body is reacting that way. So my curiosity has always been about, human behavior, human nature. It has, and how community is being, guiding and motivating a person's nature. So that has been there since, I think, class 9th or 10th. And that is what made me go into the field of psychology. Nothing much more than that.
What drives human behavior? Since this whole experience of you studying so many people and you interacting with your clients and patients, so what do you find is, see, I've been always interested in knowing what people are scared of and what are they most looking forward to. So love and fear, or you can call pain and pleasure. So that tells you a lot about a person without you having to go through their whole life story. What are they most scared of? What are they not trying to become? What do you think? Do you find common things across human behavior that drive them to maybe follow their curiosity, or that those are motivation enablers for people to do stuff?
Yeah, because again, that is where there are two debates. That one is like the nature predominantly doing everything for you, or is your nurture? Like, so it's like, are you born with certain set of traits, or is it your environment that's enabling you to explore those traits? So it's technically where the debate currently is at its 50-50. Even if somebody is born with, depressive symptoms, it might not, if the child is given a certain set of environment, they might never experience those symptoms because they're taught on early ways or to how to explore it. But yeah, I mean, I usually lost track of my thoughts. But uh, thinking of that way, I guess what the question is that uh, if I see common patterns, and I usually do, because we have a lot of research done into different type domains. So there are a lot of therapies as narratives, CBT, and other things. Even course those therapies, you have your basic micro counseling skill, and we do see that change does happen there. And when we use these skills, change does take place. So the change is happening because there is some commonality. It is impacting us in a certain way. This is what my teacher said very long time ago, that the first safe and most bounded relationship that your clients will see is with you. The relationship which will have boundaries, which will have approval, which would have empathy, which would have unconditional love, it would be with you. So that is something that you see do impact the client. They seek that relationship then elsewhere sometimes. Sometimes they confuse that with the feelings of love towards us. But we do see commonality and patterns, and that is how psychology as a discipline came up to be, because there were set of experiments done, there were set of generalizations done to prove something. And that is where research is very, basic component of psychology, where you do constant research to figure out how humans are working. Or there are animal researches that are done to establish human behavior. And you see that these researches do change the way we think about human behavior for a lot of time. So if you take addiction, for a lot of time, addiction was thought that is something which a person can control. Like if I there was this common thinking, if I don't want to be an addict, I can stop anytime. It's me who is, causing myself to be an addict. But after a lot of research and after a lot of Vietnam War, we realize there's biological disposition to one person being an addict. When somebody is using a substance, there is a whole brain mechanisms going behind it. Now we are at a point we realize, oh, community also influences, when a person is abusing, and if they're getting addicted to a certain drug, and how even the abstinence, relapse, lapse, everything is guided by community also. So
Ah,
you see
that's interesting.
where, yeah, so it took so much of research to come there. So there are commonalities, there are patterns of behaviors which prove a discipline, and that is where the research aspects come in, and that is where that guides the psychology discipline. And we see it, and also community does play a huge part in role. How our relationships are guiding us. You have this beautiful attachment theory, which tells how people, form relationship bonds with each other, how they're responding to those bonds based on their attachment patterns. So we do have commonalities in a lot of spaces, and it does give us a blueprint on how to approach a situation that is coming to us. But not necessarily every therapist would be equipped to deal with it. But it does give us a base.
One of the most biggest takeaways that I took from a conversation when we met in metro was, I asked you what is the meaning of anxiety, because I've loosely thrown around this word very much in my life. I'm feeling anxious, I am feeling anxiety shooting up because of this thing or what, and I don't know the feeling of anxiety, the definition of anxiety. I just know that there's something that I'm feeling, and it's maybe somewhat the society calls it anxiety or not. I just picked that term. And you explained what anxiety actually means, and I would be very grateful if you could do that for the people listening.
Anxiety is really, I think, in simpler terms, the way I can explain anxiety is that it's a evolutionary thing. You have a lion in a jungle, and it has a cub. So anxiety is sort of a mechanism that tells the cub to protect itself. If there's a danger, run back to its mother. So anxiety serves a purpose for us humans and every being on this planet to sort of look out for threats. And that is what anxiety usually is. There's a threat in our environment. I am supposed to react to that threat. I have two different nervous system in my body, and one is responding to the threat. And this we commonly read in class 10th and 11th, that we have a fight or flight mechanism. We see a dog, either we'll fight the dog or we'll run away from the dog. Because people like me play with the dog. but you have this, if you have feared something, your basic response to is either you run away from it or either you fight. And what helps you in between is your anxious state. So your adrenaline goes up, you feel your heart, your body pumps more blood to your body parts because you require it that time. Your breath becomes very fast. What anxiety disorder particularly becomes is when you have a dysfunction. So how we define dysfunction is that it becomes distressful for you. So I am getting anxious to a point where I'm not able to calm myself down. My anxious state is so heightened, I cannot stop and think about anything else. So that is when it becomes a problem. Any psychological disorder becomes a disorder when it's a dysfunction for us. When it hampers our social aspect, our occupational aspect, our for children, maybe school life, our personal life. So I am in an office meeting and somebody said something to me, or so I think that something is going to happen. I start hyperventilating, my thoughts go into overdrive, I can't breathe, I think I am going to have a heart attack. So that is where it becomes a problem, because you're not actually having an heart attack, you're just having an anxiety attack or a panic attack, and you don't know how to handle that. So anxiety in a very loose term is not necessarily bad, because we need anxiety to sustain. We need it to identify threats. We need it to calm ourselves down. But when we are not able to come out of that anxious state, when we don't have coping mechanisms to come out of that anxious state, then that is when it becomes a problem, a huge problem. And everybody feels anxious. I don't think there's any person who might not have felt anxious at all in their life. But degree of it varies. How you're experiencing it varies. How I might experience and how you might experience anxiety is different. So I might sometimes be, it took me 2 years to just realize how my anxiety is manifesting and how to handle it. And for some people, it might take more than 2 years. So for some people, it might take less. So it just is how it is presenting itself for me and how I am able to deal with it. So it will be different for every. There are some simple markers that we check whether you are able to handle it. If there's so your breathing is very fast, your heartbeat is really fast, you're not able to concentrate anything, everything is spiraling out of you, then you know, okay, this is going somewhere where it shouldn't. And there is a threat. There is no threat in the environment. My body is still stressed, sending me threat signals. I am supposed to feel threatful, but there's nothing to feel threatful about. And then the body keeps even more hyperventilating. Oh, why am I being like this? There's nothing. And sometimes there is a threat. There's maybe for some people, I give an example, maybe you did an assignment that is wrong. And tomorrow your boss or your teacher is going to yell at you. Yeah. So you constantly sort of keep fixating on that. And the point of that time event happens, you're in such a heightened state that you start panicking or you start having an anxiety attack. Because you reach to that position that, this is a threatful situation. But sometimes maybe that situation is not present. There's so much pent up things that one trigger just gets you off and you are like in a state that, okay, now I can't control myself. So that is where usually therapists teach you how to deal with your anxiety, where it originates from. How is it originating? Anxiety is very genetic also in nature. So if your parents have it, there's a higher chance that you might also have it. So as simple as something like that.
No, I was once watching. I saw this edit on Instagram that Matthew McConaughey was talking about some movie dialogue or something, and he said that a quote from a movie that most of my life was full of so many crises, and most of them never happened. And it's almost like relating to that feeling of feeling too anxious at a point that you're not, like, you're threatened, and it's good that your system is getting you aware of all the threats that could happen, but if it is spiraling so much out of your control that you're not able to get away from it, or if you're not able to fixate or just focus your mind on something else, or maybe just do anything
You're
else
not able
instead of
to
thinking about
get
it.
yourself out of that
Yeah,
state.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
if you're not able to get yourself out of that state, then it becomes a problem. Even with depression, it is that you have been in a state of sadness for more than 2 weeks and you're
Hmm.
not able to. So, that is your predominant mood and you're not able to get out of it. That is one of the checkers for if we are telling somebody that they're depressed symptoms. So, it is a prolonged thing. It is not that one day this thing did, one day I was able to this, when the rest for a lot of times I was okay,
Yeah.
but it's like a prolonged thing that is causing you distress. That's why when we say it's causing you distress, it's causing you dysfunction. These two
Hmm.
terms are very important whenever we are looking at a certain thing कि क्या मुझे ये disorder है, क्या मुझे ये problem है. So you might have a pain in your shoulder, but it could be just that you are not very, you're not doing exercises, you're a very inactive person, so you have constant pain in your shoulder. And you are not distressed by it, it's not causing you problem. And the moment it starts causing you problem, the moment you're not able to lift things up, sorry, that is when you start doing, oh, I need to do exercises, I need to consult a doctor because my shoulder is paining. So only when that shoulder pain causes you distress, causes you dysfunction, you're not able to function in
Oh.
your system, that is when you can go and you can be like, oh, do I have a problem, do I need to get it diagnosed? And usually there is usually the time when people do come. So when I used to work in an OPD setting, usually people would come not because they had psychiatric issues, matlab they had psychiatric issues, but they would come with the complaints ki I'm not able to sleep,
Yeah.
um, I am getting angry a lot, I'm getting irritated. I yelled at my boss and I should not have done that. Or parents would come, कि, ye to badal gaya hai.
Hmm.
The person used to be in a certain way, now it's in a different way. So these are the common complaints that usually used to come. And then it was upon to the psychiatrist to see where the presentation of the particular
Yeah.
thing is leading. So it's only when it became more of a dysfunction for the person and for the family, that is when they came into OPD. So usually that is the time when people actually
Yeah.
come to you.
This speaks volumes on the laziness of human nature. let's
It's
let's
it's
I'm
less
so
of a
sorry.
laziness. It's less of laziness. It's more of when it starts to impact me or when it starts to impact somebody else.
Yeah.
That is when this is a last resort for me, and I need to go here because again, mental health is a huge stigma. It's a huge, nobody at the first go wants to be like, कि, मुझे तो anxiety. Let's go on anti-anxiety medications. So it is a huge thing for the family to finally come there. And a lot of time referrals happen through indoors. So a person might have gone to a cardiologist and they would have referred them to a psychiatrist. So that also happens because nobody thinks the first go that I should go to a psychiatrist. It's the very last thing people do usually.
You mentioned that people don't want to be the first one to say, I have this problem, or
Mm,
I am the first one to consider mental illness, whatever, as a serious issue that I could have
mm,
and address it. And that often comes, and mostly, I think, having conversations from different generations of people. So, mostly the approach previously was to just shrug it off. If you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling sad,
mm,
or, just forget it, or just be happy, or don't think about it. So these were the common phrases that were used and that were thrown around, and people, I don't know how it made the other person feel who was suffering from such disorders. Maybe it made them feel even worse because of not being able to just shrug it off
mm,
and feeling the weight of the whole world at their shoulders. So, and interestingly enough, I was having this conversation with a person who served in the SWAT teams in US, and he was a hostage negotiator. He was an expert in hostage negotiation situations. He had some crazy stories to tell, and I asked him this same question. I asked him that his name was Terry Tucker, and I asked him that, Terry, do you believe that men of our age are now softer than the men previously? And he was like, or people in general, and he was like, it's not that you are softer or your generation is weaker. It's just that we've gotten better at recognizing or diagnosing mental illness or mental issues. We've now got terms for what you feel. And earlier that wasn't the case. Earlier it was either you're feeling happy, sad, or whatever it is, you can just move on. And that's the way it is. Now that we've started identifying what a certain situation or a condition could be, so now we know more about it, and now we have more resources to maybe overcome it. But still, I still feel there's a long way that India has to go from here to there, in regards to mental health and to conversations about mental health. What do you think are
Yeah,
like
not
the biggest barriers that are coming in between for us as an Indian society, to move forward and take this for what it is, and not considering it something not worthwhile?
I think financial would be the biggest barriers. Therapy,
Okay.
even though there are a lot of companies working to make it affordable, it's not
Yeah.
something that a lot of people would be able to afford for a lot of time. You also have this, you know, lack of therapists in the country. So there is data. I think the data currently says that we have 1 to 100 or 1 to 50, something like that, of a ratio for each person. There are set of therapists. So it's 1 to 100 or 1 to 50, something like that. But it's like a huge number. That's what I remember. There's a huge
Yeah.
number, and so it's like a classroom, and for every 80 to 90 classroom children, you have one teacher,
Mhm.
and that is a problem because then how much will that teacher be able to do? How much will the therapist be able to reach out to every person? I think the best I know, like people who are around me, they can take 5 sessions in a day and then they're burned out, or that is their limit, or they can do 6. But you have this influx of people who demand more, and that leads to burnout, and then leads people leaving space of therapy more. Like, there are practicing therapy who after 6-7 years don't want to practice because they are tired. So, or that people who continue to practice and find different avenues. So, financially, both ways, even from the point of view of therapist and from the point of view of person who is receiving therapy, it is expensive, and it is expensive also because of a number of reasons. Because it's a self-financed job. The
Mm.
training is expensive currently. Getting like I know I have been trying, and I know my friends have been trying to get into MPhil programs to get better trained and being therapists, and it is so tough and it is so competitive and it is so difficult to get into these courses. And it is so expensive also because you have to travel to every state to give exam. And
Wow.
then whether you get yeah, there are papers which cost, just to fill a form you have to pay 4,000, and it's a lot expensive
Yeah, of course.
area to be in. So it's a lot of investment to be a therapist, and it is hugely self-financed by the person. And then there's a lot of investment from the person who's taking the therapy. So either way, when the balance shifts, so it becomes difficult to sustain the goal. There are therapies which are trying to combat that you get more in less form of sessions, but usually some people are okay with that, some people are not. Some therapists do not like it, some therapists are okay with it. So there's like a lot on affordability is a huge thing. And there are good organizations which are working towards sending out affordable practices, but they're also limited with their capacity and the overload that they get. Uh, Post that, there's also not a lot of integration into mental health. So you have this one generation which is completely open to the idea of mental health. There is another generation which is not so much open about the idea of mental
Yeah.
health. And you have this clash. You'll always have this clash. Maybe the upcoming generation will be much more open to mental health. I know these very young parents who are very concerned about the mental health of their child. But the point, even during the pregnancy, they're trying to ensure that and they're able to reach to they're able to help the mother with the mental health aspect. So postpartum depression is such a huge problem in India, but people didn't used to acknowledge that, and now you have this way where mothers are acknowledging that this is something, where you have these actors and actresses coming out and telling that I have miscarriages, I have stillbirth, I have suffered through, I cannot give birth. There's so many things, and that is okay. I'm going fairy in the conversation, but you have a section of about affordability. You have a section where there's a wave of mental health information coming in. You have this lot of information about how to access, whom to access, where to access, and when to access also. There are these, I think, Instagram, Twitter, I'm not on Snapchat, so I don't know what mental health aspect on Snapchat is. They are doing
Spoiling
a
your
lot of
mental
things.
health.
Yeah, they do a lot of mental health awareness. At the same time, they are really bad for your mental health. I mean, Instagram has stopped every research in being bad for your mental health. Every research ever done. They say when Facebook, yeah, Instagram is bad for your mental health. It's bad for self-esteem
Wow.
issues. It's bad for, connecting with people. It is bad. It is bad. And yet you see so many people every time getting onto it.
Yeah.
Because it's a fake life that everybody lives. I know people who live fake lives on Instagram. The current life is very different. Their Instagram life is very different. So but these channels also have a positives where they are raising awareness on mental health, where they're increasing access for people to anonymously approach mental health aspects.
Mm.
It's also what is mental health giving you. For a lot of parents, they bring children into the mental health setup or into the mental health sector because they're concerned about their well-being. Some are
Yeah.
concerned about their academic structure. School performance is going down. What do I do? They bring them to school counselors. They bring them to psychiatrists, or they bring them to a counselor. So the motivation to get into the doors are always very different,
Mm.
and that helps you combat the stigma. But in the end, it's the same thing as when you teach one girl child and then the whole family gets educated. It's similar
Yeah.
concept to that, because if one person in the household is very aware about the mental health aspects, is very vocal about the mental health aspect, is very, pointing it out that you need help. So there are conversations that do get started. There are early signs that a person can see, and sometimes the other person might get help, and that is where it becomes important. You also have a huge literature where in Indian settings people are more okay to go to you know maybe a baba or somebody else for
Yeah.
getting help.
Yeah.
So there have been a lot of research done by UN to see how we can integrate those people into mental health stream and get their help,
Mm.
because people are more accessible, because people access to them.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's in Thailand or some other country, but there's this entire monastery where they have taught monks how to identify mental health symptoms,
Wow.
and they identify it and they refer them out. In India, also, our teacher taught us about this Dawa Dua project, which was started in Gujarat. And there, the Maulvis, the people who do Fanda and everything, they were identified to see how to marker early psychotic symptoms or early mental health symptoms, and they would continue their treatment, but they would also tell them to go to a psychiatrist, which was right next to them or there, and they would take psychiatric medications also. So there have been a communication about integrating those fields, so in order to increase the accessibility and battle the stigma that is going on. But it is a long way, not just for India, it's a long way for entire Asian continent, because our culture is also transitioning. There's a
Yeah.
lot of transition that's happening culture-wise. So how the transition plays out in future, how laws plays out in future is also important. You see transition regarding to mental health not just happening on ground, but also in the legislature. So you have mental
Mm.
health bill, you have Indians signing up, contracts with UN about improving the aspects of their mental health. You have talk about prison reforms, you have talk about women reforms. Everything is connected, and everything in the legislature is also playing out in how next 5 years are going to look for mental health setup.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody would have envisioned that India would actually launch a mental health helpline, which is run
Mm.
by government, but they
Yeah.
did, and that's a start.
Big
That's an
step. Yeah.
acknowledgement. Yeah, that's acknowledgement on a very huge level that mental health does
Is
matter.
something.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, is something. And I hope it transitions into these awareness acts and programs, and hopefully it does from the government side. But it would require also budget, and that's always a different conversation to have with government. But yeah, it is changing. It is slightly changing. You can't tell. I always tell people that babies just don't start to walk. They
Mm.
crawl and then they walk and then they
Yeah, of
run.
course.
So
Yeah.
you want to get at the running stage without doing the crawling and the walking, and that is all. That might not be possible, or that might be very difficult. So learn how to crawl, learn how to walk, and then run. And once you
Yeah.
get running, there's always running. I mean, Even the West suffers from mental health stigma and mental health issues. I mean, you have gun violence, which is very closely associated with mental health issues. So it's not like some countries are immune to this, some are not. Everybody is in the same boat. It is just that some might have better access to structures,
Yeah.
and some are still developing those structures to get access to them.
So see what I have like in whatever experience I have had with reading about mental health, or even considering my own case study of whatever 22 years of life that I lived, I feel that over the past few years I've realized that there's a correlation to, for a very personal observation that I had with myself was key. There's a correlation in how much self-awareness I've experienced, and how in tune I am with myself personally, to me being able to identify what I'm feeling, if that's a negative or a positive emotion. And that helps me a lot, because so one thing that I kind of have like a motto for myself is, you won't feel like this always. So whenever you're feeling euphoric, you're feeling super happy, elated, and again, this too shall pass, that quote, so I just remind myself, you won't feel like this always. You're feeling this right now, but this will pass, and this moment will pass, this time will pass, and this feeling will certainly go away. And again, that then there comes the state of feeling anxious, feeling very sad, feeling down, feeling not happy, whatever. And again, you just have to remind yourself. I personally, this helped me a lot, that telling myself, you won't always feel like this. It's okay. In the morning you won't feel like this. Right now you're feeling this, but in the morning for sure. Because there have been times that I was, let's say, super irritated by one thing, and the next day, or maybe the next afternoon, I was like, it was such a small thing, it doesn't even matter to me right now, whatever way it could have happened. And so that feeling, that realization of, okay, it's the same person, the same Ripudaman Bhardwaj can feel at yesterday 9 p.m. he was feeling so irritated by one thing, and tomorrow at 3 p.m. he feels it wasn't even a big thing. So now I know better to not trust myself in moments of extreme emotion. And that's something that I observed for myself. So do you think that there are certain markers, because of the experience that you've had, that one individual who just listens to this conversation can take away and realize that these things, if I can get in tune with, or these markers that I can realize, will help me navigate my journey of being closer to, or being in a better mental health state?
Yeah. So all of the things that you said, that you're very aware that what is happening right now, what will happen tomorrow, that my emotions will change, and that you use, statements to regulate yourself. So all of them come to become a part of thing we call as emotional intelligence. So
Okay.
self-awareness, self-regulation, and again, falling back to research, a lot of researchers now have shown and have been showing for the past very long time that emotional intelligence is as important aspect as normal intelligence. What we define as normal intelligence. And you have extensive work being done by cell labs to empower children to have better emotional health. And there are markers. So it is as simple as, identifying when I'm hungry. So how do you know that you're hungry? There's certain aspects. For
Yeah.
some people, it's like, I get very cranky. For some people, it's like, I start feeling very low, or I start getting down on energy. Or some people say, oh, my stomach starts growling, or my stomach starts paining. So identifying your emotional health is as equivalent to identifying if you're hungry or you're thirsty. And
Yeah.
it is part of a component of your emotional intelligence, your emotional regulation, your self-awareness. That's where
Oh,
everything
okay.
comes. So if that component is developed, or has had the chance to develop functionally, fully, not with any, it usually should develop normally. And if it hasn't, or there are some errors in that, then it directly equates to, having a problem. So the way I can give an example is, because um, I have ADHD symptoms. What I suffer is emotional dysfunction sometimes.
Okay.
So my empathy is really high, but I'm not able to regulate my emotions. So if I feel anger, I feel such intense amount of anger that in that moment, I'm not able to control my anger. It's not like I'll hit somebody, but I'm not able to regulate that. Even though I know that I need to calm down right now, it's very difficult for me to calm down because I'm
Yeah.
feeling angry and I
Yeah.
do not know how to channel that. So that is something which is what we call developmentally, which should have been developed. It did not get developed at that certain age due to my ADHD. And it's not like if a child with ADHD had gotten an opportunity to explore that area, they might have somebody might have worked with them in that area as a childhood, they might not suffer that in the adulthood. But because nobody was able to identify it for me, I wasn't able to identify it for myself, and it never got worked on. And now it has a point where it transitions into sometimes me feeling anxious and also impacting my anxiety because I'm not able to regulate.
Yeah.
So if you're able to identify it, it's very so in therapy usually what we do is we tell the person to go back home and make a checklist of things that impact them. So when is the time that they're, for example, let's take an example of anxiety. When is the time that anxiety is the most heightened? Is it in the
Yeah.
morning? Is it at the night? What are the things that are impacting? So every day they have to do a thought record or they have to do a daily record and they're supposed to give it a score. So that activity do it for two purposes. A, one, it gives us an outlet of how the person is going on about his day. It also gives an opportunity to the person to see how he is going about his day,
Very
day
important.
rather
Yeah.
than how they are going about in their day. So also when you put something on the paper, it is very present and you are very aware of, because I have to record it, so I have to do it every day. So I am recording it. I'm very aware of what I'm writing. How is it impacting me? So we're also allowing you an opportunity to get in tune with your own self during that part of the time.
Yeah.
So it's a very easy. So a lot of people do journaling. A lot of people do, they write or they journal in different manners. Some paint or some do other things. Like I had clients actually who would say that, this was a painting when I was happy. This was a painting when I was upset. This was a painting I did when I was extremely sad. And they can identify the different stroke and patterns they were able to put because they were very aware of the way they were drawing. So it's always about how a person is able to identify their mood and their things in every day-to-day life. Some people are very aware and they're able to tell, they're able to understand that I'm feeling this way. And then comes the regulation. If I'm feeling this way, am I able to regulate that feeling within me? I'm able to channelize this emotion in a manner which might be functional and which might be healthy. So if I'm feeling angry, am I expressing that anger in a way which is more proper, or not even proper, which is more appropriate or which is more healthier as compared to just throwing stuff around?
Yeah. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, any therapist will tell you anger is not the problem.
Okay.
Any anger management course will tell you anger is not the problem. It's always the expression of anger which becomes the problem.
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is where we work on to identify how, if you're not able to express, how you can express better. And able to understand how I express better, I need to identify when am I getting angry and why am I getting angry. So when why and when is identified, you are able to regulate. And when you are able to regulate, you're able to do something much better. So it's always that way. So in your story, you're able to be aware, you're able to regulate with affirmations. And then in the next day, you do see a result. So because you see a good result, you keep on doing it again. And that
Wow.
is how brain also because it
This
worked
feels
for me,
like
I should do it
a
again.
this feels like an invasion inside my mind, ki how are you able to tell me what I'm doing and why am I doing it? This feels so
That is also
invasive.
what's fascinating about psychology because you have, I mean, I know people say it's about disorders, but there is so much more than disorders. There's so much more. There is, you have theories just explaining that why people do not come out to help when they see somebody getting into an accident.
Hmm.
They have theories regarding that. They have
Wow.
theories regarding that, why. So there was this beautiful paper written, I I read it way back. But how Modi came into power in diverse India. And they use social psychology concepts like conformity, compliance to understand how in a diverse India, you have this one figure which actually became very prominent.
Yeah.
So you have theories already in place to help you understand human behavior. There are more theories which are coming up, which are being worked on. But that is what is more fascinating about psychology, that it is way more than just disorder. It's also about marketing, how you're placing order, how you are designing a product, how it's going to be more appealing to the masses. So that's where it does feel like innovation of mine. But it is more of where some people are just interested in seeing patterns and behaviors and then seeing how to, see using numbers or, experiences of people to come up with a set of a new theory for something.
No, this conversation has been super fascinating enough, and I'm pretty sure that so what I feel from this conversation, we touched upon many different topics, and the one that uh, I kind of resonated with me a lot, and also I feel that will resonate with the people who listen to this is the part two where people get to realize of understanding or getting in touch with their whatever emotions or whatever feelings that they're having. Maybe we haven't touched a lot upon how to express them better, and that could be scope for some future conversations. But it was definitely had a great time catching up with you, because there's it's been so long
No,
since I last talked to you.
yeah, and the psychology concept is so huge. It is such a huge discipline that it's very difficult
Yeah.
to just stick to one. And you have each aspect of psychology impacting a different thing. You have each
Hmm.
behavior and why it is coming. It has such a huge concept. And that's why it also takes us also as a practitioners a very long time to become set into the field,
Yeah.
because it takes experience, it takes a lot of learning to be there where we are.
Yeah.
And and yeah, not every person is attuned with every therapist, because people have different needs. Therapists operate in a different level and they might not be right fit for every person. But there is a right therapist out there somewhere for a person, and it's not necessary to approach them when you feel like you are at the last stage. If you want to
Yeah.
approach them during the first stage itself, that is also, it doesn't need to be a space where you go when you have a dysfunction or you are at the extreme ends of it. You go because there's something you're not able. People have come to me because they have to take a decision and they just need to talk it with a person and understand whether the decision that they're doing is right for them or not. And usually
Yeah.
it's not me who's telling them the decision is right or not, it's they themselves telling. But it just helps to have that conversation, and it just helps to be in that space and be in a space which is not guided by other things, which will not tell you ki अरे नहीं हो जाएगा कर लो. That sort of thing doesn't happen in therapy.
Yeah.
So it's a fun space to be in.
Yeah, I think the part that of course we'll wrap this conversation up with, but the fun the thing that you were talking about, I feel that people find themselves to be relevant enough when they're talking to a therapist or a mental health professional, because relevance is lost in groups of society wherever they find themselves, because for a person to constantly have to prove so all the relationships that they're maintaining, to some extent it's give or take, to some extent it's they portraying a persona that they have to some extent, right? And on coming back to the thing that you said earlier, this is most of the times your patients or your clients feel that this is the first stable relationship that they'll have, and this is how they'll this is what they will start seeking in more of it, because they haven't experienced this before. And maybe
Yeah,
there some people to a greater extent they've seen more dysfunctional relationships, and some to a lesser extent. But
yeah.
again, this is so much, this so much has to do with what all psychology
This,
has to offer.
yeah, it was not to do. No, psychology is with people. It's not without
Yeah.
people. So till people are ready to explore themselves, till people are coming with issues to a person who is trained. There always will be scope of seeing where it goes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it goes in a direction where we want it to be. Sometimes it might not go in the direction where we want it to be. Sometimes it just explore things. Like, I mean, people don't even know how simple things in childhood impact them into their adult. Even sometimes
Mm-hmm.
exploring that with people is such a journey in itself. Like they tell you
Yeah.
that they have it's okay, then it doesn't matter to them now. It happened in past, but when you actually start exploring with them, you realize how much even the tiniest thing in childhood has impacted them,
Yeah.
changed their basic way of interacting with their environment. So it's always a good space to explore. It's always a good space to be in when you feel like it. And so I mean I don't have anything negative to say about psychology per se,
Yeah.
but it's also how you want to interact with it. I mean, a lot of people are fascinated by it. Whenever I travel, I see a lot of people who are absolutely fascinated by what I do,
Yeah.
and that's always a good thing to see, because then people are not being mean or condescending or dismissive. They're
Yeah.
actually being coming back to the starting. They're being curious about your discipline,
Yeah.
and when they are curious, that means there's hope that the curiosity is going to lead them to things which are going to be positive, and it's going to ensure that when they reach out to their loved ones, they're going to reach out with the aspect that go, it's okay, it's not bad, I read about it, it's absolutely okay, it will help. And that's always a good space to be in. That's always a good change to see.
It has been a great great change for me to have met you that day, and being able to spread more of whatever knowledge we both could end up spreading about psychology. And it was great talking to you. Thank you so much, Geena, for taking the time out today. We'll have you again to explore more aspects of psychology, and yeah, we'll catch up with you soon.
Bye.
Take care,
Bye.
Geena. Thank you so much.